This is WXOJLP Northampton, 103.3 FM, your Valley Free radio station. Welcome. I'm Orien Aid Gillett, and this is A Baha'i Perspective. A Baha'i Perspective is a radio program that examines contemporary issues from the perspective of the principles of the Baha'i faith. If you want information specifically on the Baha'i faith, you're welcome to visit the website www.baha'i.org. That's BAHAI.org. Or you can call the toll-free number 1-800-22-UNITE. Today I'm playing an interview with Ramin Gillett, a 25-year-old Baha'i youth who grew up in Africa in the country of Cameroon and came to the United States for university and lost his way. His story describes the struggle he went through and the reward of finding his calling. He also describes his recent service trip to Rwanda with the Service Corps organization called the Orien Aid Foundation. I started the interview by asking Ramin what it was like growing up in Cameroon.
Well, I grew up in Cameroon, which is a country in West Africa. And it's always whenever someone asks me, well, how was it growing up there? It's always hard for me to answer because for me it was home. It wasn't a strange experience. It was, of course, everyone's childhood is unique, and I didn't feel mine was, at the time it was just normal. You know, I grew up with, most of the time I was the minority white child, and my parents sent me to local schools, so I was always the one white kid in the class, and that's, I don't know, it's but I didn't really, it wasn't for me an issue. You know, for many years I did not realize that there was this difference between me and other children until I think my mother told me this story when I came home one day. I think I was around 8, and I was looking in the mirror, and she asked me, well, why are you looking in the mirror? And I kind of looked over at her and I said, well, you know, I think they're right. I am different, you know, and I guess that was the first time I really thought about it, but it was never really an issue. It was, you know, it felt like home, and yeah.
So you felt included by all the kids?
Yeah.
The African kids?
Yeah. There was never, I mean, because there was that familiarity with you. You know, they grew up with you. They kind of knew you. But when they're, you know, kids that did not really know you, they were kind of fascinated to see you, and they would like to touch your hair, and just because you were kind of something they haven't, someone said, you know, they don't really see a lot of white people, so. And I grew up in a town, and yeah.
What were the circumstances? I mean, first of all, what's your ethnicity, and what was the circumstances that you ended up being a white child in Cameroon?
Well, my dad is American, and my mom is Iraqi and Iranian, which makes that a little interesting. But my dad had been living in Cameroon for a year in the 70s. He had gone to Cameroon to do service as a Baha'i, and being there, I think that's where he met my mom, and she had come for a conference, and that's where they met, and they fell in love, and I guess they really liked it there, and they decided to live there and produce children.
So you're part Iraqi and part Iranian and part American.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? All these countries have had a lot of conflict between them.
Yeah. And living in Cameroon.
And living in Cameroon, right.
Mm-hmm. I interviewed your father, and he mentioned that the class sizes are very big in school.
Yeah. I guess because Africa, there's just a lot of children. You know, well, they have a huge children population, and they don't have enough schools to keep up with all the children. So usually there are a lot of children.
So how many kids did you typically have in your class?
When I was younger, I went to a public school, and these classes were usually pretty big, with like 80 children. And then when I was older, they sent me to a Catholic school, which was private, and classes were smaller, between 40 and 50, and on average. And
And the makeup of the class was different as well, or no?
I think there was a little more diversity. I had a lot of friends who were mixed, interracially mixed parents, and there were a few. I think there was another friend of mine. He was Persian, and he went to the same school I did.
So I can imagine a class with 80 kids could be pretty chaotic. Do you remember that at all, or?
Yeah, it was chaotic, and the teachers were very strict, very, very strict. They have very different discipline than here. You know, it's okay over there to I guess punish beat students. You know, it's different, and there are different expectations of teachers, and that's what they did there. Yeah.
To keep order.
To keep order, that's right.
So were you ever subjected to such punishment?
Yeah, a few times actually.
Yeah.
And it was just normal, you know, and I knew my parents would have a problem with it, so I tried not to make an issue out of it. And I told my mother one time that that's what the teacher had beaten me, and I told her not to make an issue. I didn't want to feel like I was special in some way. You know, I wanted to be treated the same, you know, like the others. So I told her not to make an issue out of it, but she did.
What were the circumstances
of being punished?
Yeah, what did you do, and what was the punishment?
Oh, I think what was it? It was I think I might have not done my homework, or. You know, they would punish you for sometimes it was really silly things. It was like, your desk wasn't in the right place in relation to the next desk. It wasn't, you know, there wasn't order in the desks, and they wanted order. And especially this one teacher, he was just a little cruel. And I think it was one of those things, and I think he used a cane and beat me on my hands.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it seems a little. I guess it was normal, you know, because I'd seen like people get beaten, like on a daily basis, and over here. Whereas I think if that happened here, it would be, you know, you would consider it. Oh, that's really, really bad. But at the time, I didn't really consider. It wasn't like something so different. For me.
So then the class, I suppose, was pretty orderly then.
Usually, when it's so chaotic when the teacher's out of the classroom, and then they walk in, everything like suddenly like becomes quiet, like really quickly. And
he teaches one subject to all 80 kids.
Yeah, I think usually when in the younger because they have primary school and secondary school, which follows the British system. In the primary school, that was more of how it was. You'd have one teacher for most of the day. And
teaching one subject.
Right. Teaching many subjects.
Okay.
Yeah.
To the 80 kids.
To the 80 children.
So that there wasn't any dividing up of the class.
Yeah, we wouldn't really, like, we would stay in the same class, same children the whole day.
So was the classroom cramped? Was there enough room for 80 kids?
It was pretty cramped.
Yeah.
The classes were, because you didn't have individual desks for each student.
No.
You'd have it's a longer desk, and maybe 3 or 4 students like fit on it.
Okay.
And so you're sitting, on this wooden desk next to maybe 2 or 3 other children. So yeah, it was kind of cramped.
Okay. And you went to Catholic school at what age?
I was, let's see, I think I was around 12. Yeah, 12.
So after elementary school?
Yeah, after the primary school.
And you stayed in that school until you graduated from high school, or what?
I stayed there for 5 years, and it was a Catholic school, and it was mostly a boarding school, but I was one of the few students that commuted to it daily, back and forth. So after 5 years, I really wanted to try something else, and I persuaded my parents to have me do correspondence courses through the University of Nebraska. So I did that for 2 years, and it was really different, studying at home, and I learned a lot about American literature, and American history.
Which you didn't get so much.
Which I didn't get so much before, and which I really, especially American literature, I really loved it, and I learned a lot more of the artistic side.
So you grew up as a Baha'i?
Yeah. Yeah, that was my background. My parents, my dad became a Baha'i when he was in college, and my mom was raised in a Baha'i home, and they were both Baha'i, so I was raised in a Baha'i environment.
And you lived in Bamenda all your life? Or?
Yeah, actually, in this town in the mountainous region of the country, and lived in the same house for most of my life. Yeah.
Was the people of Bamenda unique in any way?
They spoke English, and a smaller portion of the country speaks English. And so that's many people ask, when I say I'm from Cameroon, they assume I speak French. But
and how is your French?
It's okay.
So you could communicate in French if you had.
Yeah,
to?
I learned French in school because the country is bilingual. So some parts, where we grew up, we had to speak English, and then if you travel maybe 5 hours, then it's all French, and you would have to speak French to communicate. But I never, whenever we traveled, whenever we went to the French-speaking side, we always had friends who spoke English, so I never really had an opportunity to focus on my French, except in school. Yeah.
So how many languages do you know then? Spoken languages.
I studied more French in college. In fact, next semester I'm taking a French-speaking class. So I can hold a conversation in French, and Persian I learned from my mother, and English, of course, and yeah.
So of those three, English is what you would say is your
most fluent. Yeah, I would say so.
Your natural language,
right? Yeah.
So you were talking about this correspondence school. How did you find this correspondence school?
It was very different for me. I had never. Most of my classes before had leaned towards the sciences, and I hadn't taken a lot of literature classes, and if I did actually take literature classes before, but they were British. It was all British literature, reading Charles Dickens, and also African authors. But the correspondence courses. A few of them were delved into American literature, like prior to the Revolution, and I really fell in love with Hawthorne and Mark Twain, and so it was. And then I was writing more, so
Mm.
Yeah, so it brought out more of my artistic side.
So the course encouraged writing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So then, what happened after high school?
After high school, I plan was always, my parents always encouraged me to go to college, and that was my, that's what I wanted to do. So I was 18, moved to Maryland.
Now, why to Maryland?
Because I have some family there, and I was more familiar with the area, and there was the University of Maryland, and I figured go to a school closer to, my dad's side of the family. And so that was the only school I applied to, and I got in, and I was there for a year. And kind of didn't really know what I wanted to do, what I wanted to study. And it was really a huge difference for me coming from the small town I grew up in to a 30,000 student campus. And challenged me in many different ways. Yeah.
Can you describe those challenges?
I think a lot, it was a lot of them were, they were kind of spiritual challenges, because you have this idea of the world when you grow up, and in many ways I was sheltered, and I came here and I saw a lot of things that were different for me, and
like what?
Just the way people interact, what people do for fun, especially the students. And
how was the interaction different?
I guess I was just coming from a very different place, and I don't think people understood where I was coming from. Here's this white kid coming from Cameroon, and
I guess you had regularly visited the U.S. to visit your grandparents.
Yeah, that is correct.
So you had sort of gotten a flavor of what
American culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't a total surprise for me. But it was just, I think most children kind of go through this when they leave home. It's just you a lot of the ways that you thought are challenged, and you have to find your own path. And that was my struggle. I was trying to find my own path, and I heard different, I still heard different voices in my head. And a huge part was I wasn't fulfilled in what I was studying.
And
which at the time was engineering. And I realized that was just it was just a mistake doing that, because I'm more artistically inclined than scientifically. And so after a year, I decided to take a break, and I worked at a restaurant for almost 2 years in Alexandria, which is on the outskirts of DC. And then after 2 years, I had the opportunity to come here to Massachusetts, and I lived with you for 2 years, and then I really got a sense of things here. Like I really got, I really found what I wanted to do living here.
Maybe you could explain a little bit what your spiritual journey was from being in Bamenda, Cameroon, coming to the University of Maryland, then taking that 2 years off to work, and then coming up here. What was, from a spiritual point of view, what was going on with you?
I think for a few years I was disillusioned with religion. And there were things I saw in religion that that I felt were hypocrisies.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was I had to distance myself from it.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I questioned a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took a step back. It wasn't that I disbelieved in everything. It was
Mm-hmm.
just by taking a step back, and I began to read a lot more and question more. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's...
So what were some of the questions that you were starting to ask about religion that made you step back or think twice about it?
In many ways, it wasn't really an active... I wasn't conscious of these things that were occurring within me.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of just happened, and I was just reacting to everything.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't... At the time, I wasn't thinking to myself that, I'm going to take this time off
Mm-hmm.
and be by myself and all
Mm-hmm.
this. It was just... it just kind of happened the way it did, and
Mm-hmm.
and then I got it. I started working and hanging out with a different crowd than I've used to hang out with before. And
Mm-hmm.
okay, another thing was with my cultural background, drugs was never talked about because it was never an issue.
Mm-hmm.
It was never... culturally, it's not a challenge, It's not like children are doing it at school, or...
They're not.
They're not,
Mm-hmm.
it's just not...
So drugs weren't prevalent in Bamenda,
Exactly,
Cameroon. Mm-hmm.
exactly. So when I came here, I didn't really understand, I knew that drugs were bad,
Mm-hmm.
Instinctually.
Right.
But I did not...
So this was the first time you were exposed to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at the University of Maryland, you were...
And then, yeah.
You were exposed to drugs that weren't... The whole thing was not even present in
Right.
Bamenda.
Right. So I saw a friend smoking a joint, and I didn't really... was that a cigarette? I didn't really understand it. So,
Mm-hmm.
And then there was... then I got to a point where I was like, well, why is it so wrong to do it?
Mm-hmm.
And why is it so wrong to drink?
Mm-hmm.
And I was curious.
Mm-hmm.
So I did.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was working at the restaurant, the restaurant has its own culture.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people smoke pot. And I got more into that.
Mm-hmm.
I would go to work and then come home, smoke pot, go to work. Mm-hmm. And this went on for a while. And then one night, I don't know, I have no understanding why, or it just, one night in 2002, I had been working at the restaurant for over a year, and I think I had smoked pot earlier that evening, and for some reason I felt really bad, and I felt like my life was going nowhere, and I broke down that night just by myself, just being alone, and I was like, this is really stupid. What am I doing? And I felt like I could do a whole lot better, And I think that was just like that was like one of the moments in my life that...
a crossroads.
Right, yeah. And after that day, it was easy for me I just began to disconnect myself from the drugs and alcohol, and then it was then the period of... Then I began to read more about the Baha'i faith, and because I felt like that was missing in my life. The spirituality was missing. And to me, the Baha'i faith encompasses all religions. And so if there was a religion to turn to, for me, it was the Baha'i faith, because it still allowed me to be in love with Christianity and Islam and all these different religions. And so, yeah, so I began to read more, and yeah.
And then what happened after that?
And then shortly after was, for Baha'is, it was a period of the fast. And I hadn't fasted in a few years.
Why don't you explain the fast period so people know what you mean?
The fast is it's a period in the Baha'i year where Baha'is fast, and they go without food or drink between sunrise and sunset for 19 days. And
what time of year is it?
It starts in March. It takes place in March 2nd, and goes for 19 days. And the last day is the first day of spring, March 21st. And during that period of time, you try to focus on the spiritual aspect of life, and not so much the material. And the purpose is to draw closer to your Creator.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what happened at this particular time?
Okay. And so I just had the desire to fast, and
you hadn't done it for a couple of years.
And yeah, exactly. And I did that, and it was, for me, maybe I think it was a way I could maybe prove it was something I could actively do in pursuit of my spiritual growth,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And after that, it was, I had that year, I had the opportunity to come here and live with you.
Now, how did that opportunity arise? I mean, what were the circumstances leading up to that?
I was really getting tired of working where I was, and I felt it was a dead end. And I wasn't, I wanted to continue with school, and it wasn't really feasible. It wasn't very convenient for me in that setting. And it was kind of like I also wanted to grow spiritually, and that environment was not conducive to my spiritual growth.
Mm-hmm.
It was like I could do all these things, but I was still, I wouldn't say I was like on my feet yet,
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason I was drawn to come here,
Mm-hmm.
and drawn to Jackie
Mm-hmm.
in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
And
This is your aunt?
yeah, yes. Yeah, and the opportunity arose or Jackie said, well, why don't you come up here and live
Mm-hmm.
with us? And for, something inside me just went with it. And I quit my job, and I quit, and I had to find someone to replace, or I had signed a lease. And so I asked my roommate, he was willing to have me go, and he would pay the full rent. And so that wasn't a huge issue. So, yeah, so it kind of everything fell into place, and I came up here
Mm-hmm.
and was here for 2 years.
So what was it like coming here?
Different in many ways, because you have a bigger family than I had experienced.
You basically didn't have family down there.
Oh, right. So it was like I was living on my own for a while, and then I came here, and I was part of a family.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess part of it is that before, you could do whatever you wanted. You're living on your own.
Mm-hmm.
But here it's more structured. You
Mm-hmm.
can't just do anything you want to.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a challenge in a way
Mm-hmm.
for me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
So what did you do when you got here?
I tried to look for work, and I became closer with the family a whole lot during this time. And I think it was also challenging for Jackie having me because I think I put myself at a emotional distance between people. And I later realized that I have this quality of judging people. And it came up in a conversation between me and one of Jackie's friends. And I had met him at this at Greenacre Baha'i School. And I just had one conversation with him, and towards the end of the conversation, he told me something that really shook me. And he said, "You need to give people a break." And I guess this was a quality I never knew I had. You know, it was quality of putting other people down in a way, and looking down at people. So that kind of brought attention to my own character, and that I actively needed to change who I was for the better. And and through my relationship with your family, it really, because your family is really open about things, so it really encouraged me to be open about who I was, and in that way of analyzing one's character and trying to make it better, it was really a growing experience for me being here.
And what about your education? What?
Oh, I went to UMass for a while. I would take night classes, and when I was taking night classes, I was hit by a car one night when walking home, and that was another crossroads in my life, the getting hit by a car. I had never really gotten into an accident of that seriousness.
What exactly happened?
I was walking home. It was after dark. I was walking home from class on Spruce Hill, and a car was coming towards me, and I don't really recall what happened. I remember the car being in the distance, and it's almost like the next thing I remember is being flung to the side of the road, and I felt suspended in midair for a while, and then the boy who hit me ran out of his car, and he was really nervous, and then I was in the hospital. I had surgery, and then the reason why I was really, I guess it became one of those moments in my life was that I was stuck in bed for maybe 4 months with a broken leg, and prior to that, I really didn't really know what to pursue, with as far as education goes, and I felt like I was just going along with this major, I was a business major, and I didn't really have passion for it or anything. And then for some reason, like when I was in bed, like one day it just hit me, I really care about how the world works. I care about the state of the world. Why don't I study something that will have me gain a better understanding of this? So like international development came to mind, and then I decided I was going to apply to a lot of schools that had this major. And for me, I felt like I could do anything, because being incapacitated for a while, you long to do so many things. And for me, I felt like I could do anything, you know. It's like once I could walk, I'm just going. I made a whole list of things I wanted to do, and one of them was to pursue this career. So so I applied to a bunch of schools, and I got rejected by most schools. And then I found this school in North Carolina that offers international studies, and they didn't have a deadline for applying, so I applied, and they accepted me, and so I moved to North Carolina, and I've been there for 2 years.
What school was that?
University of North Carolina, Greensboro, which is a small city. Yeah.
So then you moved down to Greensboro.
Yes, I did.
So how long were you at University of North Carolina, Greensboro?
I've been there for 2 years, and I'm graduating in December.
So what was it like there?
Oh, very different. I mean, different from the culture in the Northeast. It feels like in this area, there is a backlash against religion, and but in the South, in North Carolina, it's, you know, you could walk out of the student union at night and you'd see 50 kids sitting out on the lawn with their Bibles open, you know, studying it, you know. So which you would never see that here at UMass. You know, it's just not part of the, you know. So anyway, so I lived in this. It was like a renovated hotel, and one of the interesting things is in the lobby of the hotel they have a huge list of churches, and it gives you the option of, you know, it gives people who live there the option of, well, which church do I want to go to? So I thought that's interesting. That's also another difference in culture. Yeah.
You've been studying there for 2 years?
2 years.
In what field again?
And field of political science and international studies. Yeah.
Now, you had a special experience this past summer.
Yeah, I had, well, earlier this year, I had this burning desire to travel, to go to a foreign country and do some kind of service, because my education is geared towards international service. And so I looked at different organizations, and I found this small organization called Orien Aid Foundation, and it's a Baha'i-inspired, student-run organization that does work around the world. But one of the things they do is they get young people to go to Rwanda, and as like one of the purposes of the Baha'i faith is to break down barriers between people, because we have this fundamental belief that humanity is one. And so in this process of breaking down barriers between people, it gets youth to go to Rwanda and spend 2 months with the people there. You know, we travel around to the villages and spend a few nights, play with the children, and build unity. Because the organization feels that if the group can be truly unified going in, and it's a pretty diverse group of people going into this country, that by showing them that we can be from all over the world and we can still be unified, and we still care about you, the Rwandans. We came, you know, it's like, who would spend $3,000 to go to a village in Rwanda just to spend time with you? You know, you know, and I was in one village and they asked us, like, well, how much money did you spend to come here? Really? And because it's more money than they would ever have in their whole life. And it was like, if we answered that, they would be totally astounded. But we did, and they were astounded. It was just, I guess you could see that they felt really grateful for what we did. And the background of the country is interesting. I think, as most people know now, is that the country went through a tremendous war and genocide in 94 that saw over 1 million people killed in a very, very short time. And so most families, most Rwandese families have experienced death of some kind. And the atrocities it was just really bad what happened, how man became so inhumane to each other. And so this is a country that's trying to recover. And I guess if there is anywhere to go, then to help, this would be it, right? Mm-hmm. I feel.
Mm-hmm. From what you've learned, how did the genocide start in the first place?
From what I understand, this conflict goes back for many, many years. And from what I understand, it goes back to colonialism. And when the Europeans came to the area, they found this kingdom of people that spoke one language, but kind of looked different. There were the differences within this group of people was that some people were cattle herders and some people were, they farmed. So the cattle herders survived on protein mostly from their cattle. And so they were generally physically larger and bigger than the farmers. So when the Europeans came, they kind of assumed that these are two different ethnic groups. One is larger than the other. And so they began to classify people. And for the Rwandans, the Tutsis were the cattle herders and the Hutus were the farmers. That was the difference. So the Europeans favored the Tutsis, which were they were the cattle herders. And for many years they kept the Tutsis in control of things, and then the Hutus had this resentment against the Tutsis now because it created ethnic divisions, greater ethnic divisions than before. And so when the Europeans left, the Hutus took that opportunity to retaliate, for their, they're a majority and they were the underdog. So for many years they had this hatred towards the Tutsis, and they took over the country, and they would sporadically have attacks on Tutsi, on the Tutsis. And then what really sparked the genocide in 94 was the president's plane was shot down, and the president was Hutu. And the Hutus blamed it on the Tutsis. And they said the Tutsis are after us. They had this mass propaganda on the radio that the Tutsis are out to, take over the country and all this. But no one really knows who shot the plane down. So with mass propaganda, they really instigated people to kill the Tutsi minority. And, they would say things like, oh, the Tutsis are cockroaches, really dehumanizing people, that they no longer were seen as people, but as animals, as vicious creatures that were going to take over their lives. And most of the country is not really that educated as far as like school goes. So a lot of people, they're highly influenced by what the radio tells them, and their worldview is pretty limited. They don't have access to newspapers. They didn't have that access to newspapers. And so when, I can see how people can really be toyed in that way. And they were. And it wasn't like villages would travel to attack another village. It was more like neighbors killing neighbors. And there were even there were families that were both Hutu and Tutsi, and they would force the Hutu husband to kill his Tutsi wife, or the children to kill their own mothers or fathers, you know. So it's just horrendous. And you can still see, you know, a lot of people my age that I interacted with had experienced a lot of this bloodshed. And but things are moving, you know. One of the things they tell me when I was there is that please take back good stories of our country, because they feel really ashamed of what happened. And a lot of them really don't understand how it happened, how human beings could become like that. And but you know, if you go to Rwanda now, it's you can't really, it's not so obvious that there was this genocide, because the country has really moved forward in many ways. And but you do see billboards that say "Genocide Never Again," and there are a lot of genocide memorials. And so now the government has done a lot to discourage people from identifying as being Hutu or Tutsi. In fact, if you go to Rwanda, you should never ask anyone what their ethnic group is, because they would. It's now these words are considered taboo, and if you did, they would seriously be offended. And just to show you like how serious the impact is on people, it's like, you know, someone might ask you, well, how many brothers and sisters do you have? And I don't have any, so I said I don't have any. And then I asked him, well, how many do you have? And the person is just quiet, because he might have had 6 brothers and sisters, and now there are only maybe 2 of them. And they just, you know, it just brings up a lot of memory. So these are the little things that, you know, you just be very careful of how you interact with people, because a lot of people have just faced tremendous challenges.
So what does the future hold for you, Ramin?
Well,
you said you're graduating soon? I'm
graduating soon, going to North Carolina to finish up my last semester, and I have different things I would like to do. I like writing. It's interesting what I study. During school I don't really enjoy it as much, but then when I'm out of school, I kind of look forward to going back to school to keep studying what I do, which is interesting. I don't really understand why that is. But maybe if I could be more specific in my field of study, because my field right now is pretty broad. I would like to either continue something internationally related, educationally, or work for the UN, or I'm also interested in photography, which is a recent discovery for me. So I'd like to pursue that as well. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you got a lot of irons in the fire.
Yeah, I guess I do.
Well, Ramin, thank you very much. This was a very interesting interview. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Ramin Gillett, a 25-year-old Baha'i youth who grew up in the African country of Cameroon and is now completing his studies at the University of North Carolina. For a copy of this and other interviews, you're welcome to go to the website www.abahaiperspective.com. For information specifically on the Baha'i faith, you can go to the website www.baha'i.org, or you can call the toll-free number 1-800-22-UNITE.